Welcome everyone to the 202nd Knowledge Seekers Workshop for Thursday, December 14th, 2017. Once again, I welcome you. My name is Rick Crammond as your host today, and we'll have, once again, as in the last 201 Knowledge Seekers Workshop, we'll be listening to Mr. Keshe. And before I begin today's workshop, I'd like to show a picture that we had from the last workshop. And we had it at the end and we didn't really give it justice, you might say. So let me just share that and explain a little bit about that. Okay, let me get it lined up in live stream here as well. Okay, I was sent this picture by Mr. Keshe, and he said to release the picture and this as our gift to the Chinese community, and thank them for their hospitality and trust and the work in the foundation. Thank you for your beautiful nation and people. So that's from Mr. Keshe. And perhaps, Mr. Keshe, would you like to say something else about this picture before we begin the workshop?
Yes, good morning, good day to you, wherever and whenever you listen to these workshops. As we said last time, we were in China for months, and this is Caroline with our little Topoli at Shenzhen Research Laboratory of the Keshe Foundation, and this is the Shenzhen team. And I would like to thank Shenzhen Group as now a part of the Keshe Foundation Solid Work. We thank all the people involved, and in the future you will see how closely Shenzhen Group has become part of the Keshe Foundation international work and within China. It's beautiful to be there. We enjoyed our stay with them, with the Chinese community, and their, what I call trust and confidence that things will change, things will grow very rapidly in China with the Keshe Foundation and the supporters. And in a way they kept with us, not leaking any information out, that we were with them, amongst them for some months. And this was in a way the goodbye picture just before Caroline leaves China. And we enjoyed it. We thank all the Chinese community and all the people who worked very closely with us and stayed with us during our stay in China. We will see huge developments with Keshe Foundation, the Chinese people as a nation, and in due course we will see what we will inspire from the Chinese understanding of the foundation. It's a solid core. There's many of them, hundreds of thousands of them, and in so many ways their carrying the knowledge has alerted the governments and the authorities that these technologies need to be looked into and to be developed. And we thank the same, by the same way, the Chinese government and the Chinese authorities who work with us, and we thank their trust in the foundation, work of the foundation. And in so many ways, this is how it should be. A peaceful nation working with a peaceful company, organization like Keshe Foundation bears a lot of good fruit. And again, I thank all the Chinese community who were with us, supported us, and in our time of stay in China, so closely as a community kept everything shut that we can have a piece of time and we could do what we were there to do. We'll see you again soon, hopefully, and as you will see in the future reports of the Keshe Foundation developments, how Shenzhen Center has become part of the Keshe Foundation worldwide. And I thank the head of the Keshe Foundation, Mr. Hugh, in his work and sincerity with the foundation. Thank you very much. The Chinese community who wanted to keep pictures or release them while we were there, you're quite welcome to release pictures. Now that we have gone open with it, if any pictures, just please do not release sensitive pictures, which you know which ones they are. Thank you very much indeed for all your work, and all your support. On the other hand, we come to a crucial point in the foundation and teaching side. Tomorrow is the last day of the 4th year of teaching, and the 5th year starts in January the 17th or 18th. And in so many ways, we've seen many people participating and bringing this knowledge shared on a regular basis, on daily basis, 5 days a week in 3 semesters which we run. The latest, I have to give my thanks to Jim and Lisa, the head of the Keshe Foundation teaching KFSSI. Thank you for what you've done and what you're doing in development of the teaching programs and structure of the Keshe Foundation teaching. Many people have participated, and in so many ways, you still can join the knowledge seekers who've been with us from the year 1, 2, and are still there, because in so many ways now, most of them have become masters in teaching. And in so many ways, we are looking into our previous and existing, what we call knowledge seeker students kept aside, to become part of the bigger Keshe Foundation organization in running of the other part of the organizations we are running and will be running under opening. In one way or another, we need to expand on the knowledge in a way that we all understand it more and more. The ambiguity is not due to lack of understanding. Ambiguity in part for many of you is not being able to connect the information that start making sense. This is what is the part of these teachings will go. In next weeks and months, you will see a totally different approach. As you've seen, we changed. We thought about the systems, went into the direction of the space. Now we went in direction of the soul, because it was important to be understood. Now gradually we start bringing the operation of the system with operation of the soul, with the work of the man's body. This is the biggest switch for many of Keshe Foundation knowledge seekers and people who work around us. Why we went in different directions is because we have no other way to teach. And so all of you have learned from the scratch. And the people who come and follow the foundation in the future, when they go through the knowledge seekers, they come, they listen to the, let's say, workshop 202, for the first time, it makes some sense to them, but they go back to 2200, they go back to 198. I know many people who started from listening from the front and the back. They go from 200 and they start from number 1 to see what is being taught, what they're missing. In so many ways, now we are bringing something from 200 and number 1 all together. 200 teaching, medical teachings with the scientists, space teaching, agriculture teaching. They're all coming together to make sense for us to understand where we're going to take the technology to the next step. In this way, this is very important for a lot of you to bring part of, as I've done in the past few weeks, of the old teaching to relate it to the new, that you can see a coherence, a pattern that you could not see but you understand. The way we showed the connection between the emotion, or last week regarding the soul of the man and the physicality of the man, and the line of the connection, like comparing it to the sun and the brain of the man. Now you understand the slowing of the fields leads to the strength you need. When we go to space, it changes in so many ways. Now we are looking at the brain tissue of the man, which is a protein based. What about if we go into space where we change the nitrogen into potassium or calcium? Or we go higher up, we work in the region of the same order of the link, but in different order of magnitudes, where now that we have a carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and um, um, what we call the component of the structure of, it's more or less star formation of the cell of the man, we have to understand new dimensions with the potassium and the same combination. We see this in our structures. We have lower level, which you have hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. And then you have another stack layer, which becomes with sodium. Then you have another stack layer, just about double by weight, atomic mass, or what we call by gravitational magnetic field strength. Then you come into potassium, calcium. Then you have a 20 gap. You go straight into zinc and copper. What about the next 20 gap? What about the next 20 gap after that? Then you see a pattern. Then you understand in deep space where with the human brain we got to the first level conjunction of the interaction, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, where you go to the sodium 20 up and down, you go to potassium 40 up and down, you go to zinc up and down. Look at the performance of the copper and zinc together. Next, the same if you look ratio as carbon, nitrogen and oxygen, then you see a pattern in life, in the universe. And then if the space gap between the sun and the earth to reach information of oxygen level is 70 millions of kilometers, that the man in his brain, by absorbing the energy of the amino acid, has reduced the size of the brain of the man for reduction to a structure of the emotion and physicality, let's say in 5 or 10 centimeters of the brain at the lower strength. Now you understand, if the man gathers the intelligence, or man comes across another cycle of amino acid pattern in sodium, in potassium, in zinc level and above, now you see the size of the brain of the man does not need to be 10, 20 centimeters. Then you come to understand when the strength of the higher order amino acid, what we call the structure of the beginning of life in the universe, it gives you a different dimension of understanding, a different dimension of development, and different dimension of manifestation. If the amino acid gravitational magnetic field has led to a physical body as us of 1 meter 80 and God knows 20 centimeter, 40 centimeter thickness if you look at it, and a brain emotion reaction, can you imagine when you be able to go through the mutation of the strength of the elements by order of magnitude from present amino acid to potassium or zinc level barrier? You don't need that much, but you have more in the strength, in level of order of magnitude, to be able to do things that at the amino acid level of the present time, of what we call nitrogen level, is not possible. Then you understand how you can manifest yourself, how you can generate and gain the speeds beyond the physicality of what we call nitrogen amino acid level. Then we understand intelligence, observation of the existence of what we call the vision and comprehension changes totally. Open space of the fields, millions of kilometers in the solar system. Brain of the man, few centimeters at the amino acid level of nitrogen. And then you understand there comes a point when you mutate that the strength of the soul in its totality superimposes the structure of the physical soul of the entity. Then internally you exist in comparison where we externally exist in respect to our soul. These are what in the time to come we will see by mutation of the elements within the structure of the amino acid within the soul and emotion of the man. We can move our physicality not by moving it in, but by changing mutation of the elements, by strengthening the soul of the man that encompasses the physicality. Then man's travel in the depth of the universe becomes zero time. This is what is come. But you got to realize there is always a communication, line of communication in gravitational magnetic field length between the soul of the man and the soul of the physical part of the man. Then a lot becomes much more clear. A lot becomes very, very transparent to all of us. That is us through our emotion, which decides, as I always say, how much of the banana we are going to peel. That how much of the energy we are going to show. How much of this will affect us in totality in our future understanding of the space, the creation, and our interaction within the universal community. Many of us will choose different path of understanding because we want to be still human, but we do not want to be in so many ways living in what we are used to. There'll be those of us who will adventure and will go beyond. They go through the transformation of the, what we call transmutation of gravitational magnetic field strength to find out, is it possible? And then when they find out it is possible, they endeavor to go further up. Then they become what I call travelers of the space. And they come back to human race and say, there is such a place, with such a thing, we've been there and it's so nice. Sorry, I can't take pictures because pictures in that point are not matter states and the cameras there does not work the same as here. Then we become to understand, do we need to trust? Or we see the soul and the shyness and the brightness of the soul tells us this is what we miss. And then it's for us to elevate our souls to understand more of the new understanding. So, in so many ways, if you go back to the original teaching, if you go back to our original explanation of the creation of the, what we call fields within the structure of the matter states that leads to creation of what we used to call in the bubbles, in the spheres, the empty space in the center of the rotating reactors. And then in understanding that, transferring the knowledge to the soul of the man, creation of the soul of the man, then we see exact combination, the exact work. But now, with this, it gives us a very powerful tool. This powerful tool is for us to understand how to remanifest ourselves in the dimension of the physicality of the man when we return back to earth. Transformation into one dimension to another will become one of the trickiest games for human race to understand. It's not that we will not be able to, but in a way to understand the process, once we learn that on this planet, then we can test it and replicate it across the universe. What does initially this means? Can I share the screen, please?
Yes, go
Yes.
ahead.
What does this means to all of us? It's very simple. If you remember the existence of sun in the interaction with the existence of planet Earth, in interface position of the fields that led to creation of the amino acid, what we call Mr. Cohen, has a great game to play. We have and we cannot miss this. Because in the scientific world, in the present time, we talk about amino acid, we talk about life, we talk about creation of this planet, and everything with it is connected to the sky, Mr. Cohen. You got to understand the four elements of the amino acid in balance interaction when in the composition become part of the egg and the sperm, which in totality, let's say 8 of them, lead to creation of dynamic processes, which this dynamic process now tries to find a balance. And in trying to find a balance, it creates within the structure, even it looks physically dimensional matter division, but it creates a field rotation. Now you have a circle and a sphere, rotating a sphere of the energy which is not from the father nor from the mother, but in totality a new combination. Where in essence, for all to be in balance, it needs to create a central balance point, which all fields from all have a balance field connection with a center, what we call the soul of the man. Even though each one of them has its own center of operation. But the beauty of this is very simple. Now that I have created it, the energy absorbed, I take energy from the environment too. Where this environment is the womb of the mother. That's how I can divide. This is how I can have more. It doesn't come from nowhere. This new soul, this new center, starts absorbing energy from the liquid, from the plasma of the womb of the mother, from the environment, and through strength from the universe. It is absolutely, absolutely crucial for you to understand this. As I said, this picture, if you understand, could be one of the most important pictures of all teachings. It's very simple, but it's very direct. It brings in the totality of 200 teachings, if you understand. Because now that you understand, you have created the soul of the man, the central energy that can absorb energy from its environment, that by receiving this energy, it balances back with those who created them, it feeds them and allows them in so many ways to divide. The vision of the cells as we see in the present life, in the videos, that the egg and the sperm come together and then after a while they divide. How come they divide? Because this central point, what we call the completion of the soul, absorbs energy that becomes the feeder to the physical structure. The umbilical cord and the rest of it comes later, because this has already established it, and with it, it connects itself to physicality of the mother. Then there is a crucial point in this. This is absolutely important for all of us to understand. And it's my wish that you all understand what is about to be said. Because this is what, as a human race, we have been craving for. We've been looking for, and we have killed many things without understanding this. Listen very carefully and comprehend what is about to be taught. Because if you understand this, you have found the secret to life in the universe. If you miss it, you need to go back and understand what you missed in the whole of the teachings. As I just explained, the creation of the soul in the center allows the absorption of the fields from the environment of the womb of the mother, that allows in receiving more for each cell to receive enough energy that they cannot hold on to, and they go through the division. This is how the cell of the man is fed. The umbilical cord is for clearance of the surplus energies that it needs to be once the physical part takes over. Before that, the life is independent. That's the point when the umbilical cord is made, the physicality become a leech on the back of the soul of the man. But what is crucial to understand is that the soul now is absorbing from the plasma of the womb of the mother and the environment, and in return feeds into what it led to its creation, the cells. And as they don't and cannot divide on themselves, what they have created now becomes the feeder of them. But the crucial point is, if the soul of the man from onset managed to absorb energy from the environment, why can't we do it now? What stops any one of us to go back to where we started from? Be a free plasma within the plasma of the womb of the mother, be a free plasma within the womb of the universe. Then, anywhere in the space, you can feed yourself without the need to terms of physicality. Then, in this structure, man exists anywhere in the universe. Because now you decide, as a soul of the man, what to take as a food, as energy, as a way to live without killing, without destruction. And this is the whole purpose of these teachings. When the man learns to go back to origin of his own creation, before the leech of physicality attach himself to it, that man learns to exist in the depth of the universe without ever looking as another energy source, as a life food. then we become the giver of energy. We become the giver of life, exactly the same way as when the sense soul was created, it start feeding without taking life from them. This is the change of the position of the man. This is the change where we understand now we become the creators. This is where our soul, when it's freed from our physical condition in the spans of the universe, becomes the feeder, becomes a star, becomes a new life in the span of the, what I call, life of the universe. As I said before, we never knew we were all nano code, nano makers when we cooked the first meat, when we start using a Chinese wok. Now you understand, in essence, within our soul, we have the knowledge, and in so many ways, goes back into the teaching of past 4 or 5 months, that I always said, the brain of the man has no connection with the physicality of the man. Because even today, the brain of the man with the soul at its center is still feeding itself from the environment of the life, and proportions itself with the physicality to accommodate the physicality for its physical life and the physical soul of it. So now you understand, even today, as you think I'm eating, I need the food to survive. In fact, your brain is getting fed by itself from the energy, plasmatic fields of the plasma of the womb of the earth, the womb of the solar system, in the womb of the universe. It's for us now to tap into this, to understand this, then we become independent of time, position and strength. Then we become independent of physicality. Then we decide when and where to manifest ourselves in the terms of our own condition, to create the balanced position with the rest of the entities, souls in the universe. I bless those souls who understand this knowledge, because then you have matured into understanding more. Then you comprehend fully that from the point of inception in the womb of the mother, we always knew how to absorb energy from the fields of the universe, and became the feeder from what we absorbed for the physicality, for the soul of physicality to take shape. And this is the way you convert yourself in the spans of universe from the, what we call the plasma of the creation, to the plasma of physicality. Then man does not need to kill none. This is the knowledge which was given to Moses, and he did not deliver. Trust in the soul of the man. Because it's the essence of our creation, and this repeats itself anywhere in the universe. Then we understand we do not need to take energy as packages to stop or to absorb another cycle. Be it the fish, be it the land, be it the tree, be it the fruit or whatever. Now, maybe you understand why we thought about the gases at the beginning. Then we thought about the ganses. Now you understand the essence of teaching of the ganses was to show in the totality what is the physicality of the man. how the physicality is created. How we can lead to the creation of our own physicality anywhere, any point in the universe. If we manage to create the soul of the man to become the center, that he absorbs what the fields of the universe does not need, that the balance of it is transferred to the other souls, what we call the soul of physicality, for them to manifest themselves, then you understand the total teaching. We are here to serve and not to be served, because this is the purpose, this is the only essence of the creation of our soul. But collectively we receive, that collectively we can serve, that collectively we are here to repeat the same process. Then you understand, in totality, life is a mirror image of the existence of the Creator. Because that's what it does, that's what it do. This is how, if you go back to the teaching of the Keshe Foundation, with all the knowledge seekers, we all came, we were served knowledge, and by understanding the knowledge, we start serving the knowledge in a bigger way that more could be served. We received a gift, and that gift, we gave it a gift in a bigger order to those who are ready to receive. This way, man is ready to enter universal transportation, communication, and existence without ever leaving this planet. As a soul. Because the soul of the man carries all the information needed, all the strength needed to be in communication or manifest itself in any dimension according to the strength of the wishes of the soul of the man. This brings us to a very important point. And my wish and my desire is that no man will ever abuse this, and as my command, no one shall be able to, even if they try. Now that you understood this, now that you understood this, a new games come into play. And that is, if you remember, in the Gans poles which we rotated, where we put the Gans of zinc, or Gans of CO2, or Gans of CH, or a Gans of copper oxide, when we rotated it as a given speed, they transferred their energies to the center and they took a physical position with the liquid transition, where in fact, if we look at it, this is the soul of the man, this is the brain of the man, and this is the physicality of the man. But in interaction with physical structure of this planet, gravitational magnetic field, both inertia and gravity, this skin has dropped to create its own balance, which leads to the shape of the man. But if you look at it, in essence, the brain of the man and the soul of the man does not need it to change. Then, if we go a step further in the knowledge, and in so many ways go back to the core which we made, and we put the ganses in it, and in so many ways we created different dimensions of it, then I have a very big surprise for you. And that surprise might shock many of you. All of you who made all these ganses, from the CO2 to zinc oxide and the rest, you saw something very funny, and you called it amino acid. This time, in the new understanding of the time, what about now? Instead of loading your reactors with the ganses or liquid ganses of the matter state plasma, with the amino acid ganses. Now, if you understand this, you understand man can create life anywhere in the universe. Because in so many ways, as you were not all expert, when you took the ganses, you brought some of the amino acid with you in it, but you are not aware of it. In all my teachings, I repeated it. Now, this time, if you take the amino acid, make ganses of the amino acid of the same, you can generate life. You become the creator of new cycle, which in its rotation creates a new soul. And this become the way those of you who are in a space technology physical dimension, you will control through emotion, through non-tangible line of communication, through your soul, the craft. This knowledge has been hidden from man because man was not ready. Now that we have made a peaceful man out of the human race, according to our wish, man is ready to understand. Because when your soul is freed in the spans of the universe, in conjunction with the amino acid of the environment, which the soul of the man will come across to, it manifests itself in the physicality of the dimension of the environment of the manifestation. Now you understand. This soul is created out of the amino acid. Not out of the matter states, but with interaction of the amino acid with other elements within the atmosphere of this planet, has dictated the split of the shape to the physicality of the man. Many of you will test different amino acids in your dynamic core reactors. But be aware of the emotion which touches you, not the physicality of the core. You got to understand, rotations over 10 to 20 RPM is even too fast. Those of you who will go to RPM 2,500 and plus, because you have to have confirmation of physicality, look at the rotation of the combination of the physical dimension of protein within the womb of the mother. Some rotate as high as 100 to 200,000 RPM. The faster is for the weaker. The slower is for the stronger. Because as you go slow, you can absorb all the energies. When you go fast, you don't have that time. It's very simple. I explain this in a way, if you're a marathon runner, you run as fast as you can. But when you come to these bottle trays where you have to take your water, if you go very fast, it's very hard to pick. If you go slow, you can pick as many. To be the soul of the man, to understand this operation, and to be able to operate, you have to be the turtle which runs as a rabbit, but in different dimension strength. Now you understand how important the teaching of today is. You could not come to this point if you didn't understand the teaching of past 200 or past 4 or 5 years. Is the accumulation. Then you come to understand something beautiful. If you take the hand of the man, for example, then you'll understand something interesting. You remember the beat? It's the totality of gravitational magnetic. We only look at the physical part, we don't look at the field part. Then, if you understand this, you have found the secret to the universal energy absorption. Those of you who wrote to me very recently and you said, I do this and that, and I said, yes, you're correct. Now you understand. If you look at this, in so many ways, is what we showed as dynamic system on the platform when Marco made the system in Barletta. And I said, this will become the center point of the education for space technology. Now you understand. So now we move to a new dimension, that us become the creators. And with the dimension of the amino acid of this universe, this galaxy, this solar system, this earth gives to the need for 10 fingers and 2 legs and a heart. Where we change to amino acid of the new dimension, because within the center of the soul of the man we have the full spectrum, we'll manifest ourselves as the entity of the universe at a point of interaction. I made man in the image of myself, depending where the man is and what image he wants to manifest himself as. Then you come to another point which is very easy. You remember? When you release a given strength, then here at this point you manifest yourself as one thing, and here with a different strength another. Then you understand the emotion of the soul of the man dictates the manifestation of the physicality of the man. Now you understand those of you who said, what are we going to do with these amino acids? Take the amino acid from copper oxide, take the amino acid from zinc oxide, take the amino acid in a combination of either side of the structure of the two, and then add hydrogen to it. Then you shall see how you will manifest yourself, for example, here. Because the system which you start will become part of the structure in combination, in interaction with the soul of the man. The dimension of the physicality will be out, and the man will travel and live through his soul, which means the everlasting peace on this planet has started. Because now we reach the soul of the man through his own creation. It will be very scary point for those who have a wrong intention, because they will lose their soul. Those of you who attempt to make this, make sure you are not, and I mean you are not, stealing and lying to your own soul. Because now you've gone to play with the essence of your own creation. And you remember what I said, those who have the wrong intention will not be able to board the flight, because their souls will not allow them, because it knows it has a wrong intention, and with it, it'll be its demise. I walk off because I want to live with a lie and the cheats I lived on this planet with. It's very much the story of what I said before, the lion's mouth on the wall in Rome. You trust to put your hand in it, and you know, I've done nothing wrong, and I'll take my hand out. Without the fear of what's going to happen. When you have that fear, do not even start, because your soul tells you, red light. You've done so many wrongs. And in that point, those of you who get to that, reach that point, the soul will shut itself down. It means the end of physicality. The day of judgment, when there shall be no God to judge you, but your own soul against your own action. That's why we'll see not many people will travel the span of the universe with us, because they're scared of that mouth to put their hands in, because they don't trust the conduct of their own soul. We will not ban man to enter universal community. Man stops doing it because of no trust is in own intention and work of physicality, but not the soul of the man. As I said, there is no theology in the world of the science of universe. Very simple. You took the souls, you made the dynamic creation of all those ganses and the amino acid. If you look, all these amino acids which you gathered in the dynamic reactor is a copy of the egg and the sperm and the soul of the man. This time, instead of bringing the egg and the sperm together to bring the pattern mosaic of proteins, now you have protein to gain. And in it has the gravitational magnetic field gans of the copper, the zinc. And if you produce zinc and copper in different ways, then different dimensions of the structure of the man in different part of this planet. So there's a zinc in one part, higher magnesium in other part, makes you Chinese looking or make you African looking. But in essence, the rest is all the same. Now, For the first time, man learns how to create of his own essence, copy of itself in the dimension of physicality, and travel the span of universe through the strength of his own soul. I wonder if you like to eat yourself, let alone another. How many of you have seen many cows getting absorbed from the South Pole and many elephants coming from the North Pole? But because the earth absorbs what it needs in the field of strength and transfers that to the existence of life within the surface, equal to what is needed to create balance on itself. Now you understand even why we have different creatures in different parts of this planet and how it comes to be. But in essence, all have amino acid protein as a base. This has been one of the mysteries of creation, not given to man. Now you have it. And my wish is that no man will ever try to abuse it. This is a tool of peace. This is the ultimate weapon of peace. Knowing that I can exist, I can create more beautiful things than myself, that the others can enjoy, is not a sacrifice. It's serving through the soul of the man in a way that the soul of the man was served in the womb of mother to gain life. This is what these teachings are about. In so many ways, we are reaching the pinnacle of understanding of totality. Now, when you use the amino acids of different combination of copper in different tanks you created, or zinc or whatever, understand one thing. I created them, so they're connected to my soul. It's me who puts them together, and it's my energy which is part of it. So it's connected to me. This is how we control the space reactors in this deep space physical conditions. Where I keep on saying that the present computers and even the faster ones are not as fast as the motion of the soul of the man, not even the thought and emotion of the man in the strength. Then you understand, according to intention of the emotion of the soul, man dictates the speed of his travel in the span of the universe. And then in the interaction with the conditioned fields of the interaction of the strength, dictates the manifestation of itself at the point of the universe where he decides to release, or as I call peel, the banana to the level that body strength more is exposed, that it can interact, and the interaction of the fields of the soul of the man with gravitational magnetic field of the environments of the destination leads to the creation of the soul of the man and the strength of the environment in the physical dimension, or what we call soul of physicality. That's where you manifest yourself. In the teaching of this morning, past few minutes, I have opened the secret of creation to man. Many of you will never understand. And those who understand have found the key into universal community. And those of you thoroughly understood the technology from the beginning, then you understand the physical dimension of the existence. As I said, I shall never make the mistakes of the prophet of the past and cross the line. Because I have already owned the soul of the man, which is mine, not the others. And if I respect my soul in the dimension of physicality, I will do the same with others. and I create a gap distance that they can have the pleasures of existence, but not stealing from, or not to be stolen from. Understand these points very clearly. Then in a way, I have given you another key to become man of universe. Those of you who dare to test the amino acid, be aware of the physical dimensions of the existence within the physical soul of the man. You will understand soon, but make sure the tongue of the man does not speak another language to the emotion of the soul of the man. God help you. You cannot shout, "I'm man of peace," when we create the dimension of your soul through your own amino acid, and it says the intention is not. This is how man will be recognized in the depth of space, that he speaks and lives and thinks one and the same. Not out of fear, but out of understanding his own existence. We are not preachers, we are scientists of the universe, and a man has to learn the true knowledge of the creation in the universe. And this is part of it. Those of you who develop and understand this fully, as I said before, you become the captains for those souls who do not want to cross the physical life. And you do not become another God, but they understand you are ready to serve through your soul, that their physical soul can see the dimensions of the universe. That they can trust their souls to you, with you, that you can bring the strength that they can see more of. Because each one of us has a different strength soul, and he allows us to see a better spectrum. We travel the depth of space collectively, because then we see more of, it allows us to see. Would you like to eat the same food, morning, breakfast, lunch, day after day? Seeing the same thing day after day? Or you say, you, I serve you with mine, that you take the pleasure without expectation to receive any. But in that process, as they get elevated, they create the vortex of the field flow, and they open their side to your side. This is extremely important to understand the teachings of this morning. Listen to it many, many times. Many, many times. Because if you think you stood and understood all of it with the first time, you are still in the same dogma as you have been for thousands of years. Comprehend the essence of it, not the word of it. Understand the process of it, not physicality of it. Now you understand how every one of us can create a replica of the soul of itself. How every one of us can be in essence a soul, where we do not need the dimension of physicality. I wish many of you understand this. It makes my job easier to transport or to carry the humanity across this threshold of animal behavior. what I said, one of the ingredients which was missing from this planet, that everything behaves so in animal behavior, was one ingredient. And that in reality is for the man to understand the power of his own soul. And that he is in charge and he can give to change the others in different shape and direction as they wish to accept, and as is available, they will change accordingly. When you kiss me and I bite you, how many times can you kiss me and I bite you? Till the energy of the source of your love to me changes my bite to kiss. And in understanding, we feel ashamed of what we done. How many times, as man of earth, we have gone into talk, shout, cry, and then in understanding, hug and cry. When you reach that point with the essence of your soul, you have matured to enter the universal community. Not because of crying, but because of understanding the totality of the creation. Why have I been biting other lives for me to survive when the love of creation was within me? Shame to be in the body of the man. Now you understand. Take from my soul to elevate yours, but don't steal from it. Understand the process. Comprehend its potential and live through its operation. We could not teach more, but we open more knowledge in different aspects from now on. But in fact, those of you who've been trying to understand your own soul and not to eat and not to do this and that, remember you absorb the energy of the plasma of the womb of the mother and the universe to create the physicality. It's the same soul, it has not changed. It has submitted itself to the pain of physicality of the dimension of the manifestation which is there. Become detached from it and become that soul who started the creation of physical life. Then you understand how to manifest yourself in different points of this planet, inside or outside or on it, or anywhere in the universe. Then do we need jumbo jets? Then do we need to say, I'm calling you, I'm coming to see you, or I'm here in front of you, would you like me to manifest myself in physical dimension, that it gives you the pleasure of seeing me? Not I'm here, take it, you gotta swallow it, because I'm here and I do what I like. I manifest myself with you, in front of you, if my manifestation gives you the pleasure of elevating your soul with the pleasure to give to the others. We should change part of the words and writings. It says, I'm made man in the image of myself. Change the man to the soul. And myself to the soul too. and then you see yourself and how you interact with others. As I said, there is no theology in the work of the universe. It's understanding the process of the creation in the essence of the creator, not the creator in the essence of creation. Work to the point that collectively you can create these souls, that collectively now you elevate the soul of the man through the use of the protein amino acids which you have collected. But understand, you all have to have the same wish. In the intro of today's teaching, you see a ball hanging in the middle of the table. Those of you who've been with me or been around, you know what that ball is. I created that ball and I hung it in the center of the teaching, the first knowledge seekers. And I said to the knowledge seekers around the table, when you unite in the soul and understanding of the wish as one, the ball will shine. Because the fields you release through the pleasure of knowledging, giving knowledge to the other person on the table, in interaction with this ball in the middle, which carries the essence of physicality as its copper, will create the light and the manifestation and dimension of physicality of this planet. And as we know, it went black, because the intention of one was murder. Understand, if your intention is wrong, it becomes black. If you see black in your reactors, when you try such a thing, understand, you have submitted your soul to the new dimension of understanding how falsify your intention of wishes of spoken is compared to what has been sent by the soul of the man. We call it a lie detector in the present time. Thou shalt not lie, as one of the commandments to Moses. You cannot lie to the existence of dimension of the physicality soul of the man in comparison or in interaction with the soul of the man. Black means taking, and when it's black, it means does not allow the others to receive. So you become not only a liar, but you become a thief and stealing. And this, you by yourself block the elevation of the soul and transmutation of the strength to a new dimension to become the passengers of the universe. As I said before, and it's in the writing, no man will take the crown of kingship, because this means I have to steal, and no one wants to be, those are the true servants, to be in the term of the physicality to steal, so there shall be no king, as we are all equal. Implement such a technology has a lot of implications. Implementing it the correct way brings new implications, new way of living, new standards, new understandings, new comprehension of the totality, and it takes seconds to do, not thousands of years to go to theology schools to trying to analyze every word. There are no languages and there are no translators in the universe. Now, most of you understand the purpose of the teachings past 4 years. Now you understand. It wasn't the purpose to make the nano coating and the plates and the ganses. As I said, I brought you through the magic path. We were looking for that protein on top. For you to understand how man can create the physicality. As I said to you, I'm a perfect teacher and a beautiful magician. It's right under your nose and you don't see. But those of you who endeavors to go to this path, understand, clearly understand, you are playing with the fire, but you are putting your own soul on the stool of judgment. And it's you who judges himself. There are no gates of heaven. But in fact, if you are true to yourself, no lying, no the stealing, you will enter the dimension of the soul of the universe. Then you decide how you want to manifest yourself. It's in the writing of Baha'u'llah's name. He says, pray for your children 20 years before they're born. Is that they receive the soul of perfection, that they're already elevated to the dimension of the creation of the Creator, not the physicality of the man. Any questions?
Good morning, Mr. Keshe. It's Caroline.
Good morning, Mrs. Keshe.
There are a lot of people which have not clearly understood what is plasma. What is the field of plasma? Apparently, there are a lot of discussions going on about plasma and among the knowledge seekers about the field strength and what plasma really is as a field. And I think this is a missing part if it's not understood.
Plasma is a collection of dynamic fields which only attracts the strength which itself needs to confirm its existence. And at the same time, it's what I call a washing machine to absorb those who are available, which are available, and they need refining to be available to the others to be able to complete the operation of their souls. So in fact, plasma is nothing but the dynamic combination of plasmas that in rotation, in trying to reach perfection, that it feeds itself to become balance, it creates dynamic motion, or what we call spherical dynamic motion of itself. If you look in all my teachings, in all, even in one of the videos which we have, in our initial teachings, is two fields. They move together. It's two fields which, if you go back to it, you remember it goes like this. And then one turns as the other. Why do we use this picture? I am of a higher order and I want to feed the lower strength of you. That by elevating to the higher order, you feed me. Or you give to the others, not necessarily me, because I know I receive what I need. The choice of arrows, even in our teaching, in our books, has a meaning. Higher strength to feed to the lower, that in that process I elevate you and we find balance. And in that process, we create the dynamic motion of the plasma. So a plasma is a dynamic field, in a way a dog chasing its tail. That in that process, the higher strength in trying to feed the lower strength, and at the same time the higher strength of the field you're trying to feed, it's feed itself others. If we go in detail of this field connection, it's very easy to understand, because I've explained this years ago. I was explaining, I think, this to my son. You see, you look at the field like this, but in fact, if you look at it, it's like this. Each one of these of a different strength. Is the same with this, carries different strength. In a way, when this tries to catch up, this does not fit into here. In one order might fit into here, or in another order might fit into here. And it's collective in a way, if you look at it. The tail, if you look at it that way, this is trying to reach, for example, this one to feed. And this is trying to feed this one. And in trying to do, they create speed of rotation. While this one is trying to match to this. Lower strength to the higher. And as we said, higher always tries to reach the lower. And in that process, it creates a turbulence, a motion of the flow of the field. So a plasma is created. But you have to understand, this itself is a target of others who have this soul, this strength, or they have this strength, or they might have this strength. So totality of all, and then this trying to feed this one now has received more, it creates a dynamic motion. Then this is what we call a plasma. Collective interaction of the fields, that their interaction leads to the giving, not receiving. But in process we receive that we can give more to create dimension of existence. Any other question?
I got another question regarding plasma field. Is it possible to visualize it, or
Excuse me, that was a question that came up in the Keshe Plasma Reactor group yesterday, which was, is the plasma invisible to start with? Is that the definition, part of the definition of plasma, is it invisible? And then we were confused of what is the fields versus what is the plasma.
If you look at it, now you know what a plasma is. You got to see all these arrows, and a field carries a full spectrum of all the strength of it. You got to feel a plasma, not see a plasma. In a space we don't have eyes, we don't have lips, and we don't have anything else. We have a dynamic plasma. That's what I said in the teaching. This is the strength of the emotion, for example, of our plasma. here. This is the strength of vision, or it's the strength of the presence. Then when you go in that dimension, you feel the emotion, this different strength which the plasma carries, and relate that to the feeling. This is the vision, looks so beautiful. I always say, those who know me, I carry a twin soul. The twin soul with me has been with me for millions of years. Because I feel the existence of it and has a connection with it. The sun has a twin. Without it, cannot confirm the existence of itself and the dynamics of ourselves. At a point of essence of creation, we only can confirm our existence in the presence of another. Otherwise, how can we confirm that we exist? Our twin souls are the confirmation of our own existence. But in the dimension of physicality, man has chosen the physical life as a twin soul to the existence of his soul. And this is what is not understood. Now you understand. Does it need to be physical to confirm? Or goes back to the teaching that through the emotion of the soul, I confirm the existence, the physicality of it, which is the physical entity at the point of manifestation. So, do you need to see a soul, or do you need to see a field, or what this strength of the field gives me the emotion of? There is one thing, in the full spectrum of the field of the soul, fortunately, we do not see things like sadness, because it goes when it becomes so low in the matter. By that time, you have already passed the dimension of the soul. So, what we call taking emotion at the matter level does not exist in this dimension of the soul of the man as such, unless we go to much, much lower in the back end of the soul strength, and then where it becomes more matter state, that in this end we feel that physical dimension strength. Then the soul feels it, but because of the higher order strength of itself is there, but does not create it because it doesn't need it, and it never feeds it. Because it's part of its structure. Because when it feeds it, it elevates it. This is what we need to understand. This is what we have to understand from the process of the work of our soul and the fields.
Mr. Keshe, could you explain more about feelings? Like, for example, you mentioned the eyes, and we can't rely on our vision in terms of seeing fields. So we have to rely on feeling the fields. Now, do these feelings, are they originating in the physicality and limited to the physicality?
Not really.
How does that work?
Not really. In the level of the soul of the man, we still see, we still feel the presence. It's very much like a bat is blind, but it knows where the other animal is. It does not see with a physical eye, but there is a mystery even in that. In the world of biology or science of animals, they say these animals are blind, they don't see. But in fact they see, but they see at a strength that the man has not realized, and he calls them they fly in dark. A bat is never blind. Even if he doesn't have an eye, he still sees through the field strength of itself. It would have been no, it has no sense to create the eye which has no vision. And we hear it in the world of scientists today. It says these animals are blind. There's nothing God created that he has no use for it. Our soul does not create anything which has no use for it. So when a scientist says these animals are blind, they're not blind. It's just that we don't have the tools to see what they see. And they say they see ultraviolets or whatever, or they feel through the noise they send. They see the vision of their eyes, but we do not see that strength. Otherwise, it was no use to create eye for the animal. And they communicate through the soul of themselves, that it brings manifestation of physicality. I was watching a program with recently, it's called The Blue Planet, done by BBC. I love the programs which David Attenborough makes. Even it's written for him, but the way he explains the emotion of the knowledge, it transfers a lot of feelings and understanding. But he misses always the soul structure, and he looks for physical interaction. In this new series is released on number 2, Blue Planet number 2, he has a section where he shows a pack of lionesses go hunting. They go to hunt a giraffe. And the strange thing is, the head lioness is something like 0.5 kilometers ahead. It knows that the giraffe will come down this path directly in the line where she's waiting for. Then you see the other 4 or 5 lionesses have positioned themselves in how to push this giraffe into the direction, narrow point of the lioness, head lioness, that she jumps with precise accuracy to the neck of the giraffe. You have to understand, this is a huge space, hundreds of kilometers. Giraffe can go in any direction. The strange thing is, us as human beings, we call ourselves the king of the creatures. What a misguided man. We don't hear the lionesses to shout and howl and give each other instruction. We don't see them to give orders, I'm going there, 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 there. We see no vocabulary language between them, sitting down, setting up a strategy, how we're going to do this to get the giraffe. And then we call ourselves the brain of the creatures on this planet. They speak through the sequence of understanding through the emotion of their souls at the strength that none of us understand at this point of time. Humans are so isolated that if we see and wish to see our son and it turns up in front of us, oh, I wished, I don't know, God is with me. But the animals, through that strength, plan a strategy. They see the overall, like a satellite on top, the whole environment, where this giraffe might go, who's got to be where, and we haven't seen them sitting in the war cabinets planning it out. So it means us as human have not even reached the level of the animals which we call their animals. We are the animals, we don't even understand that part yet. And what we come says, oh, it was my vision, it happened. Do we need the eye to see? Or have we chosen the eye to lie to ourselves? To steal? If animals are so advanced in understanding not only their physical position in respect to each other, they understand the whole geography of the land. They understand the motion environment. We had to have Newton to understand more force exerted on an object will go in a given direction. The animals in the language, they know if I give this soul this push, the physicality will follow. This is where I need. We haven't even reached the animal understanding of the communication of our souls, visualization of the environment, and then we rely on the eye, which fools us all the time. We have brought ourselves so low that we are happy with the lowness, and then it's like a peasant, a man who has nothing, and he claims to be the king. Didn't they do that with Christ, bless his name, and they put a crown of thorn on his head? You call yourself a king, and that's all you deserve? Isn't that the truth about the human being, not the Christ? We are nothing and we claim to be the king of animals. We need a satellite GPS location to see where our car is and what's the train that we have to turn. These animals know the train, they know where they have to be and how they have to guide, and they even assess the emotion of the giraffe. It'll go that way. The lioness does not move a meter, stands in its point, and the giraffe walks into that point. Precise planning precision. America need 10 drones and 50 satellites to get that giraffe in that point, if they can guess it, if it's going to be there. Otherwise they miss it, the drones are somewhere else. This shows man has not even understood the level which the animals understand. The symbol of the thorn as a crown on the head of Christ is the symbol of the man in the dimension of the creation, seeing himself as a king, not the Christ, bless his name, claiming to be the king. This is what do we need the eye to see, or the eye having it has blinded us, reduced us to more to be attached to physicality, that without it will be better, because then we use our soul, our emotion of our soul in detection of the environment. When you watch these programs like the Blue Planet, and the cameraman shows you the reaction of animals and whatever, from now on become the soul of the animal. And look at it from the soul, not from the physicality of the position. And then you understand how much more we have to get to know the work of our own souls to even reach the level of the animals. Forget about the trees, what are called vertical people, which are even not ahead of that time. We have a long way to go, and these teachings are a bridge gap to bring you above, that you can see the others, then you don't eat the others, then you see the operation. Then you see that that giraffe, in essence of his souls, is not want to be there, because this time I'm going to be available for a herd of lionesses in the future, but today my soul is not mature enough to the level I want to have. I'll find a way out. If you see the giraffe kicks, in a way we kick ourselves into the run that we can go further to mature ourselves. So, do we need the eye? Not really. We need the vision of understanding. I watch these things so many times over years, and I say how stupid the man is, and they think they are the head of everything. And so many times I always explain it with the physicality of Christ, bless his name, and the throne of the crown. In fact, that throne of the crown showing the stupidity of not being the king is for the man and not for the Christ, bless his name. Is for the man in the dimension of physicality, which have not understood the truth about the soul of the creation of itself. A lot of truth is hidden in the mysteries of the conversation of the man, because otherwise he will never understand. At least this way he's attached to it till the point that he understands. And maybe for the first time man understands why the crown of thorns was ever put on the head of Christ by symbolic. Is for the man, not for him. That you're nothing and you think you're everything. The eye of the man has fooled the physicality of the man, not the vision of the soul of the man. Any other question?
Mr. Keshe, I think some people are still having trouble with that idea, in the sense of the question from Jan. If the soul of every man is a part of the soul of the Creator and of the same order, why would the Creator allow division of the soul of the physicality to manifest itself as a lying or stealing situation?
Because then the soul of the man sees his weaknesses that he can cover it. Because it understands the totality. You see, you walk down the road or you sit on a table with a woman, she's married, or with a man who's married. You have a feeling, you create a feeling through the soul. Understanding there is, you would like to extend it to the physical direction, but there is a consciousness of the soul. I am married, I have given my soul. You both see the desire of physicality, but we both understand the strength of the emotion of commitment of the souls. How many times you've been in this position? Then you understand, it's the man who decides to cross the line of physicality, not the soul of the man. Then when you cross, you steal, you take from another soul which is already shared with another. Man has to understand most of the understanding of the work of the soul in his interaction with his physicality with others, and understand it in full. As I said, the reason why Christ was put on the cross was because of sharing soul while his soul was committed to one. This is very harsh for Christians to understand, but this is the truth. Is read the Torahs, written part of Jewish history, the true life of Christ. You call it punishment, but now it was the balance of the position. But it created itself in the essence of creation of understanding. This is what I was explaining very recently, past few days, about the manifestation of Christ, as we call resurrection, to Mary as a new physical dimension, where she only recognized the soul of the Christ, not the physicality of it. It took a lot of convincing for Mary to understand this physical new life is carried by the soul. So in a way, as we go to Mars and we manifest ourselves as a Martian, Christ through his soul managed to manifest himself in a new dimension on this planet the way he wanted, because he was aware that Mary will fall in love with that physicality the way he fell with the soul, and he manifests himself in that direction. We wait to go into a new dimension to manifest ourselves in the condition of environment. Christ did for the love of Mary. There is a lot of deep understanding in the true essence of the creation with the life of Christ plus his name. Man is not mature, he just looks at the physicality. These are what we have to understand. And because people don't understand, it has become mystic. Now you understand there is no mystery. Now you understand the essence of work of your own creation. Create with what I taught you today, the strength of a soul of the Christ. You shall see the soul of the Christ and you understand his word. And then you see the truth. You don't need no intermediaries. Today's teaching was part of that. And gradually in the future teachings, I'll get you to there, because now you understand the creation and the strength of the level where one of these arrows I showed you carries the strength of the soul of the Christ, which carries within the structure of the soul of the man. And you will hear the voice of the soul. It depends on you if you want to translate the voice of physicality that I heard, not I felt the emotion of it. There is no theology. I have taught you in the way that you become aware of the total physicality and the operation of the soul. As I said, today's teaching is very, very important because it teaches you for the first time how to absorb energy in the span of universe, that you decide at what point to give so much of it to create a dimension of physicality in respect to another environment. Very much. The other environment that you manifest yourself is the soul of Mary and the soul of Christ, which gives to manifest itself that Mary sees the soul of the man the way she likes, and a committed, not the playboy of the past, through his soul and his physicality. It's very, very harsh for those who have believed in fallacy to accept what a load of rubbish we listened and we believed. But it was no choice. We were shown to be the fact. As I said in my talks of the past, I shall return the stone of Vatican back to Colosseum, because the true essence of the knowledge of Christ will be known by the man. There is no need for house of false messengers. Committing human race to peaceful life needs the understanding of peace by the soul of the man, not by teaching. Any other question?
Good morning, everyone. And this is Rosa.
Good morning, Altaja.
Mr. Keshe, good morning. Mr. Keshe, when we talk about the cell in the womb, when I was growing in my mother's womb and my cells were dividing and differentiating to different organs, my soul was feeding my physicality.
In a way, it's the energy source you need.
But then at one...
How do you divide? You're a doctor, you're a medical person, you're a dentist. You've been through the cycle of education of physical life.
Yes, of course.
Where does it come, the division? Where does the energy come for it to divide? Stand still and ask yourself one question. You talk about the division of the cell, the rapid division of the cell from 2 to 4, whatever. How can you divide and be still of the same size and dimension if you don't receive energy from somewhere? No, nothing transfers. Part of the cell itself absorbs energy from the liquid of the womb of the mother, but partially due to the dynamic structure of itself, creates the center point that it absorbs energy through itself of a higher order, and then in reducing, dividing it, it receives it back. It's very much like neutrinos which go through the earth, then they don't manifest themselves somewhere else. So this neutrino of energy which comes from the womb of the mother and the environment, going through the cell of the whatever, sperm or egg, which is trying to divide, to amalgamate, to become more, it slows down and it gets absorbed in this new higher order which is created by us or by
Mr.
the
Keshe,
cells.
I understand that. The only thing I want to know, because at one point when we're born, the soul doesn't feed the physicality. We steal from our emotion to feed our physicality.
No,
Then,
that's when the physicality comes. No way, no way, you're so wrong. Nothing is stolen.
so when we, for example, if I feed my soul, my physicality with my soul at this point, then it should be okay. But sometimes we feed our physicality with our emotion, which is not the correct conduct.
No, no, no. We don't feed by emotion. We interfere with the feeding line. We don't feed it. We interfere with it. We don't feed it.
At
The
what age,
soul,
at what age we do that? I mean, I want to know what age.
from that point of inception,
I see.
from point of inception, we create. It's just because is, you see, if you look at the protein structure with 3 and 1, which we call it in our teaching because that was the easiest way for me to be able to explain it. If you look at the star formation, you have 12, you have 14, you have 16, yeah? And in that process, you have 1. In all of them, in creating fields to balance among themselves, then they try to feed the other to collect collectively. They create a field, a position, where collectively they find, okay, instead of going everywhere, we put everything in the bank and everybody takes from everything, but this bank always gets drained by this. So it creates a flow. If the doctors of today, scientists of today, look at the magnetic field structure of our amino acid, they'll see this shape. Because these are not static, they are dynamic, they rotate, and at the top, the hydrogen trying, it creates the spaceship here. The shape of what we see is a dynamic flow of field. So in reality, when you put 2 of these together, now this imaginary, what you call it, balance field, and this imaginary balance field, they try to balance each other. It creates rotation, and it leads to creation of life. And then to be able to maintain this, as they give what they don't need, they take more from the environment, and that's how they divide. Our life, in essence, comes from taking energy from its environment, and then we forget about it because then it doesn't fit into our structure of understanding. We always look for something physical. We have to put food in our mouth, then we are alive. We have to understand, and I've done in our teaching many times, that our soul receives its energy from the universe, from the environment which it lives in. And it's so much of it that in feeding back leads to the operation of the creation in interaction with the soul of the physicality. That's where the brain is created. When collectively the soul of physicalities want to balance of control with the soul they've created, then it leads to the creation of the brain of the man. What we connect to is easier than going there. So this part of the space is for my arm. I want this part. I connect to this. A twin system within a twin system. And the physicality absorption of the fields within the structure physical matter of the brain. As I said, in the space, if we go with the protein body of the man and let's say, okay, we get rid of our body, physical dimension, to absorb it into the physicality, and then we go with only with our brain, then it's amino acid level, then we have no brain. Because now in such a planet Zeus, This field strength is gas, but your soul is still there. The essence of the creation of totality is still there. Doesn't matter how it manifests itself in physicality. So in that way we understand, man needs to understand the essence of his creation. It's so small that it's the meaning to him to accept this is me, small but sweet, but with all the power of essence. Is the pride of man. You have to go 10,000 RPM that you are doing something. But look how fast your body rotates and how fast do the elements in the blood circulate that collects all the energy of all the souls. If we understand and get rid of this arrogance of the pride, we become happy beings in the essence of our own soul. And this is what cannot be. Because everything to us has to be big, to be frightening, that I am something, then we do in the matter of the soul. But it's totally opposite. We receive energy, and on receiving it, we, in a way, it's like we chop it up to the strength that the other pieces of the in the egg and the sperm can use, that they develop, and then when they develop they have to split, otherwise they cannot hold to the size. So that division comes in. We do the physical part through the absorption and the work of the soul. Soul feeds the soul of the physicality. On the physical side we use B12 fast energy sources and B9 as what they call it, folic acid, in the structure of our body, that we can give that energy to physicality to match with the energy which comes from the soul, that the two can match the physicality of the essence of existence with the soul of it, matching growth, and they do. When the mismatch comes, then we get problems. That is why we use a nuclear base, radioactive base, to give that energy which is needed for physical division to match with the energy which is now is coming from the soul, which feeds the soul of physicality. We haven't never understood this, and we made all these biological, mystical, scientific, theological games with it. Now we understand. Let's rewrite the history of the book of the man and see how much we made mistakes and where we can add to. This is the beginning of opening of the knowledge. Let the man write his own history, rewrites his own science. That's what's the purpose of these teachings. Then you understand why people like Dr. Rodriguez, who understand partially a fraction of these teachings in the essence of physicality, are so successful. Because if they understand more, people like you, like Dr. Paris, like other scientists we have with us, then they find the key into the essence of the creation in the universe and eradication of all whatever man calls diseases. We haven't managed to become the batch of lions that without talking we can hunt for our own mistakes in our physical existence. We are still hunting for the other souls to steal from, not to show that we have not understood our own existence. This is the problem. This is what we have to understand. This is why I opened the door. Now try the plasma gans of the amino acids, but be aware it touches your soul. And if you are strong enough to stand the change, then you'll see the true life of the universe. Because then you know you only can take from it what is yours. I received a writing, I think, from Molana very recently. Can't remember who sent it to me. And I put it to a couple of Iranians. It's beautiful. Molana is one of my favorite men in the writing who understanding. He understood the soul, but he couldn't teach it in the essence of understanding of physicality to man, because that time they could not understand. He says you only see what you are yourself. You call somebody a liar when you lie yourself. If you don't lie, you don't see nobody lying, like a child innocent. When you are not racist, you don't see the color of the man. Like a child, till the age of 10, 11, children don't understand what's black and white. And Maulana puts it in a beautiful way. And this is what we are in essence. Read the writings of Maulana. It's all, most of it's translated into English and other languages. Was he a Sufi? Did he understand the philosophy of the soul of the man? Do actually Sufis understand the philosophy, or just follow the pattern of the rotation of the soul of the man? And then at that point they reach. That's why they rotate themselves that way. Jews bang their head against the wall. Sufis follow the pattern of the universe, rotate the light in the direction of the soul. Jews make it out of the confusion between the soul of physicality and the soul of the man. Sufis turn around and dance the cycle of life of the man. In the essence, in a way, with their hands out, you have those dynamic systems which you bring in, where your feet stand at the gravitational point with these dimensions, and your hands are magnetical. Or is it vice versa? There have been many, many scientists in the world, many, many real true scientists who understood the process, but they could not explain, because the man was not ready for it. And Maulana is one of them. Any other question, or shall we call it?
Oh, Mr. Keshe, this is Libby. Good morning. I have a
I
question.
thought you called Elizabeth now.
Thank you. Yes, I am. Thank you. I would like clarification if what I understood when you told us that the Ganses do get drained, was to help us be free from our attachment to the Ganses and recognize that it is all within us. And why?
Can you repeat the question?
Certainly. Last week you let us know that the Ganses can get drained, and we do need to replenish our health units and our breathing systems and all of our units, because they come into balance and then they no longer have the strength that the human
Yes, can I correct this, please?
Yes,
I know
please.
I had this discussion because I was listening to the teaching yesterday, and somebody got upset that the Ganses disappear. They don't disappear. Each, as I showed in these arrows, each Gans has multitude, a composite magnetic fields. And when they give all the strength in a given strength to the environment to balance themselves, they are still there as a plasma, but not at the strength which is manifest to us, we see. It doesn't mean they come the end, but it comes to the point of balancing at a given strength with the environment. So the plasma still carries. It's like when we die with a physicality in the physical dimension, it stays in the physical matter strength, but the soul of the man, which is the higher, still carries on. It doesn't become the demise of the soul of the man. And I think people misunderstood this. The plasma diminishes in strength because each environment extracts given strength plasma. In that strength, when you become balanced, you become invisible. Does not mean the rest of the plasma is gone. That strength, even in our manufacturing, we re-feed the ganses back into the mother tank, and then we put a new one. Because if you carry on using the same gans, because we have it in the tank, we rotate it 1,000,000 times, you have absorbed majority of the given strength. That's why we replenish. In the cycle of manufacturing, even in Accra, we do this frequently. Because it's not that the plasma disappears, the plasma makes available all it has in a given strength. And the environment takes, this is why, for example, you put ganses in the freezer and they freeze sometimes. Because they give so much to the environment of that freezer, which creates a certain given strength, which is not a plasma anymore, it's just the water which is left in there, you freeze the water. But certain amount of ganses of the different lower strength still are in there because they are part of it. The mass will take over. We have to understand the totality, not just look at one, what I call picture frame.
Can I also ask you in regards to Dr. Rodrigo, because his soul is so pure, is it his intention and his desire to help all of humanity that keeps his units going, even if he hasn't changed the Gans waters?
In so many ways, the members of the Earth Council soul, the members which have chosen, are all at that level. And I explained to them in very recently, even I wrote to Dr. Parviz, that the soul of the members of the Earth Council, Dr. Rodriguez is a member of the Earth Council for South America. These souls have surpassed the physical condition. They can reach, and it's a gift to their soul. They just need to wish. The system is just a tool for a physical man. The members of the Earth Council have such a soul that will take man thousands of years to understand their operation. They are collectively the messengers of the planet for the development and evolution of the man in the right direction through his soul, not through physicality. But at this moment of time, they use the physical systems that the man feels happy that I can change. But Dr. Rodriguez, with the power which is within his possession, he can think and he will do the job. It frightens members of the council. When I speak to them, I usually hold back for them to understand the gift given to them. The gift given to them is not as a gift given, allows them to see more of their own soul, which at the higher order reaches the lower in much easy way. Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Parviz, Lisa, Wayne and Alex, these are gifted souls. These are the souls which some of you might call reaches even beyond the soul of the Christ and all the prophet of the past, because now they reach the soul of the man where the physicality of the prophet of the past could not explain. Being a member of the Earth Council is a special breed of souls, and even frighten themselves when they get results and they see things. I set out with Dr. Parviz months ago or weeks ago to bring peace in the Middle East, and I had to guide him and in a way cajole with him. We met in Istanbul. I always gave to his soul. And then the Istanbul meeting, and then we met, a lot of you know, in Indian Ocean very recently with Dr. Parviz. And in so many ways, the soul of the members of the council is sacrosanct and is beyond the understanding of the present man. Collectively, when they meet as a council, they have the power to change everything for humanity. But they have to understand that the man has to be ready for the change. If the man is not ready for the change, becomes the man who said the earth is round and they put him on their nose. It takes time. But Dr. Rodriguez, when you see, especially with his work, he's a man who's devoted his soul to humanity, and being a member of the council, he does not need even to make the system. But he has, as we say, the talk of a child, that the child can see the magic. But in fact, there is no magic. Everything is on the table. Respect the members of the Earth Council as they are the guideline for man into universe community. We don't make idols out of them, but we make them in the body of the man, that the man understands we are all equal, but in soul they can change. They have the power, and it's best on them by seeing more of. It's not a gift they have. They already possess. Now they can use higher order of the strength. That in one strength equals to the soul of all the beings on this planet. Now you understand the power. But they have to be graceful and they have to be cautious that they do not mix the two. Otherwise they become magicians, and then we know what they do with the magicians. This work of Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Parviz, Alex, as you've seen, and Wayne, and Lisa, are collective soul of the man's cry for freedom from pain. Reach them, you'll find salvation.
Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Thank you indeed. Shall we call it a day? I'm exhausted.
I have
Of course, Mr. Keshe, we'll call it a day now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. And try to understand the teaching of today, because I have opened the door to man to understand the creation of life, of himself, and of the lives he can create, and how he can feed his soul in a space without the need for eating another or killing another. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Keshe. There's lots for us to go back and review in this video and this workshop, I believe. Okay, that's the end of the 202nd Knowledge Seekers Workshop for Thursday, December 14th, 2017. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And now we'll go out with some video and music with Flint. Thank you.
Just as we require Earth suits to live on this planet, we would require ships for travel in outer space. However, these spaceships must be dynamic and conscious in nature. In other words, the spaceship must easily be reconfigurable and adaptable to meet different challenges and scenarios in different parts of space. Therefore, constructing a spaceship out of similar materials as we would do a car, boat, or airplane just doesn't cut it. The spaceship must be created out of Megrav's plasma. Since it is naturally conscious, Megrav's plasma can be concentrated and configured by thought, according to the requirements of space travel. Being dynamic, the spaceship would be able to grow to accommodate more within herself, or shrink to navigate difficult areas of space. Crew living spaces would be dynamically reconfigurable and never boring. During space travel, the spaceship would replicate the Earth's gravity field via Megrav's plasma in order to protect the crew and for the crew to be able to function as they would on Earth. Various cosmic rays and gravitational fields of different magnetical strengths would be encountered during space travel. Through Megrav's plasma science, these rays can be converted and used according to the needs of the crew and spaceship. Space travel means being away from Earth for months, years, or decades at a time. There's no practical way to bring large stores of oxygen, food, and water from home for such long voyages. Once again, Megrav's plasma can be constituted in such a way that vital nutrition would reside in the very air that the crew of the spaceship breathe. Eating and drinking would be reserved purely for pleasure and as a social activity, and food and drink can be constituted out of Megrav's plasma as desired. Are you ready to become the space explorer today?